Alright guys, this is my last video most likely for this build, at least for the near future, but I wanted to give you guys an update on where I got to, kind of a couple of things that I've changed with the build, the passive tree, some thoughts on the Ascendancy, and then I'm going to talk about some problems with the build, and my thoughts on kind of the game and future updates. So I'll do the build stuff first, so if you're not interested in kind of my general thoughts on the game and stuff, then you don't have to listen to that. You can just get the build stuff and go. But I will say you should probably stick around for problems with the build so that you can kind of know what to expect of like the problems that you're going to run into, because yeah, there's a couple of problems with the build, and I don't really think that in the current state of the game that they're solvable, but I'm happy to be wrong on that front. So really quickly, some new gems. I did end up putting Fire and Cold Mastery back into Sorcery Ward. I had the int to do it. I just respect a couple of nodes. So this ended up being, it's just a little bit better. It recharges a little bit faster, but this is not a big deal. You don't have to respect the int to do it if you don't want to. I think pretty much everything else is the same, except for I added in Voltaic Mark. So this gives you a much higher chance to shock the target. So against bosses or rares, if they're like lightning resistant or crit resistant, I'll put Voltaic Mark on them, and then I'll shoot them with the Stormcaller arrow, and it's pretty much like 100% chance to shock at that point. So yeah, you could, as a side note, take persistence out of emergency reload and put it into Voltaic Mark if you want to make the mark stay up for a little bit longer, but that's just like dealer's choice. Whatever you think is better, you can put on this Voltaic Mark, but I would definitely recommend using this skill. It's helped the shocking of some of the tankier enemies be a lot more consistent. But I think other than that, pretty much everything is the same. I'm going to take some time before this video goes up, and I'm going to update the Mobalytics guide. So you guys will see all of the new stuff in there. So you can reference that if you need to. But yeah, pretty much everything else I think is the same, except for this. I put blind in on Wind Dancer just so it blinds enemies near you when it pops, but it's pretty minor. So, and then yeah, let's quickly look at the passive tree. So what I ended up doing was dropping some of these evasion nodes up here, and like the weapon nodes for careful aim and stuff like that, because I found that it actually wasn't adding that much evasion. I think before I was at like 76-ish%, and now I'm at 73, but I get back 5 points from my tree, and then it's more than that. I get back 4 weapon points and 5 actual passive points. These nodes are good, and if I was like level 100, I might consider going and taking them, but the build was definitely starting to struggle with damage when it came to fighting like really juiced map bosses. For example, like these +4 map boss difficulty. That started to become a problem because I just wasn't killing them fast enough. And this is also going to tie into my kind of thoughts on the game and problems with the build. Is the damage is getting pretty hard to scale. I did spend some money on a really good crossbow, and it makes a big difference, but there's just not that much ways to scale crit at the moment. It's kind of hard to get a lot of crit chance because crossbows have very low base crit percentages. So even though my crossbow is really good, I think if I had like a quarterstaff, I'd be at like 50% crit. But with this crossbow, I think I'm right around 36-ish. Let me see. Yeah, 37.63. So, yeah. But yeah, so basically I ended up unspecking from some of this evasion stuff. I used my weapon set nodes to get up to Wild Storm because this is a lot of damage. So yeah, and also to anoint this is way too expensive. I know I said that in the last video, but Isolation, Fear, Isolation, these are the pretty much like top tier essences or whatever from delirium. So these are, unless you have a lot of money, I would not anoint this. You could consider anointing it if you do have a ton of money, and then maybe you go back and you start getting some of these lightning nodes or something with your extra weapon set points. But I had the weapon set points, so I figured why not go and get this, because it's really, really strong. Other than that, we did end up getting Coming Calamity because it's really efficient. We're already right by it, so 3 points just to grab this is really strong. And then I think I would probably recommend, and how I'm going to do it in the mobilytics guide, is I just put this point into attack critical chance when I hit level 91. But I think I would probably take this dual socket. So drop this point and take this dual socket, but I'll include that in the mobilytics guide, so you won't have to deal with that. But other than that, yeah, it's pretty much just grabbing all the crit that we can that makes sense to grab, grabbing the good lightning damage nodes that we can. And yeah, I mean, future of the build, like if I was level 100, I would probably be grabbing this, grabbing this point again at some point, because it is kind of useful. Getting crit chances is, we need as much crit as we can, and then probably grabbing this lightning damage or grabbing this stuff again, getting the movement speed and evasion rating and this stuff, because this is good. It does add some evasion rating, but yeah. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the passive tree. Like I said, I'll update this on mobilytics. I guess notably, I did take out power shots, but that's just because I really, really wanted to get over to Wild Storm. I would consider taking it again. Like maybe I'd put a point here for the bow for increased chance to inflict ailments, and then grab power shots maybe on my next level or something like that. Because the crit damage bonus is pretty nice. Yeah, you can see it. It gives us, a few hundred DPS on all of our skills. So yeah, so that's pretty much it for the passive tree. So we can look at the ascendancy really quick. You can see I'm still using the same stuff. And I think the ascendancy overall is pretty good. I still have not tried this. I have tried Zealous Inquisition, dropping Ceremonial Ablution and grabbing Zealous Inquisition, and it's really good. Like if you're pushing Breach, you definitely want to take this. If you are just trying to juice maps, if you're not worried about bossing, this is really, really good. I would say even if you are worried about bossing, you might even drop this and take Witchbane, because a lot of bosses just do a lot of physical damage, so this doesn't actually really do anything about that, which is, yeah, it's a problem. But yeah, Zealous Inquisition is very, very good for Breach, and if you're just juicing maps, if you're just blasting maps, I think I would probably drop Ceremonial Ablution and grab Zealous Inquisition, because you'll get enough out of just Obsessive Rituals. Just getting the base sorcery ward, it will give you enough to have enough for maps, enough of an elemental shield. But yeah, you can see we do have a pretty fat elemental shield, almost 3,900 elemental shield. So we are quite tanky against elemental damage. So it does end up being pretty good. Yeah, so I think that's it for the Ascendancy. And now we'll talk about kind of my thoughts overall on the build, what the problems with the build are, and then I'll kind of wrap up with my thoughts on the game and kind of how I see this build going forward. So yeah, this build is really squishy, and there's kind of no real way around it. It's the problem with life builds in the game at the moment. There's just kind of not really all that much you can do to get a higher life pool. Basically everything that I have has either like a tier 8 or a tier 9. I think this tier 9, this is tier 9, this is, tier 8. Pretty much everything I have has as high of a life roll as I can possibly get without, except for this helmet. This helmet is the only thing that doesn't have an actual flat life roll on it. But I can't go into strength because I have such high attribute requirements, so I can't actually spec a lot of these nodes into strength. I only have 116 strength, which is the exact minimum that I need for this crossbow. So yeah, that's kind of problem number one, is I have no real way of getting any more life in the build, at least not that I can tell, other than getting absolutely absurd items with like T11 life on every single one, and getting just having the best gear possible, which I don't think is the design intent behind the game. So that's, yeah, the build is extremely squishy. I have tried, I think, 3 different citadels now, and I failed all of them because I've just gotten one shot by the bosses at some point. Which it kind of comes down to not knowing the boss moveset because I just went into these blind. And I think I fought the Count once, and I fought Doriani once, and then one other time I just died in the map, which was kind of earlier on in the build, and I should have spent more time fixing the build at that point. But yeah, I fought Doriani, and when he like goes into the laser form and does the big circle around the room, he just killed me instantly, because I had no idea what that move was. And then with the Count, I think he had a couple of really bad mods on him. He had like enrages periodically and haste, so he was just sprinting at me at the speed of sound, and he just basically like lasered me and then hit me and killed me in about 0.2 seconds. So yeah, that's the build definitely struggles with certain bosses. I will say there's plenty of times I've cleared plenty of T16s with corruption and irradiated, and I kill bosses in those maps. It's just certain bosses are very difficult, and if there's like a huge abundance of slam skills at every single fucking boss in this game, and evasion does absolutely nothing against AoE attacks unless you take acrobatics, which we cannot take acrobatics because we are taking obsessive rituals, which already gives us 50% less of armor and evasion rating. I think when I did take, I was like, what does it look like? I took acrobatics. I think I had like 30% evasion, and at that point I might as well not even have any evasion because that's not going to do anything. So yeah, late game this build gets very squishy, and there's really not that much that can be done about it. We are currently kind of just lacking the necessary tools to be able to actually get a higher life pool, which is why you see everybody is going evasion rating at the current patch of the game. Or, sorry, not evasion rating, energy shield. Everybody is going energy shield because it's the only realistic way that you can ever live against any of these huge attacks that the bosses are putting out. So, and also like regeneration is in a super bad place for life. There's no real way to recoup your life quickly. A lot of the like mods on weapons, for example, this leeches 6% of damage. It's physical damage only, so I can't use, I'm a full lightning build basically, so I'm not going to leech a meaningful amount of life from that. Maybe if I could, it would make sense to go into some leech efficiency nodes, but I'm really not going to get a lot of life out of that, so there's really no point. So yeah, it's kind of in a really rough spot right now for life builds. It's in a pretty rough spot for evasion builds as well, I would say, because you kind of just take acrobatics and pray that you're not going to get hit. This particular Ascendancy has a problem with taking acrobatics because we already have, like I said, 50% less armor and evasion rating from obsessive rituals. So we really can't stack that with acrobatics. There's just no way that you can get enough evasion rating. So, yeah, I would say that this build does have also a little bit of problems with kind of like CC and damage are the other kind of ways that I see this build having issues. Kind of the strongest damage dealing builds right now are anything cold related, because you can actually freeze the enemies and not have to deal with their mechanics. And we really don't have anything to, like, we have no way of freezing the enemy or CCing the enemy. We don't electrocute. We don't have any sort of, we have no cold damage, so we don't have any freeze buildup. And even if we did, it probably wouldn't be worth doing. So we have a lot of problems with CC on bosses, which is kind of the number one way that if you're squishy, you can deal with some of these harder bosses. You can just try to freeze them and burst them down extremely quickly. I would say after I've gotten some gear and I redid this passive tree, the build does actually have really, really good damage when it's on full uptime. I can kill bosses extremely fast if they were just, standing still. Like, my target dummy DPS is probably really, really high. But yeah, dealing with mechanics, your DPS is going to drop. You need to constantly juggle Voltaic Mark and Stormcaller Arrow in order to keep shock on the target, so that when you're using your Stormburst rounds, that it's proccing the pulse. So there's a lot of issues with the consistency of dealing damage on bosses, to where some bosses are really easy because they just aren't moving that fast. Like my favorite boss to fight is that big mushroom guy, and I think it's in Sump and Decay, like the Fungal Mancer or whatever. He's really easy because he just doesn't move that much, and his moves aren't that quick. So I can deal with his mechanics while also keeping the damage up, and I can kill him extremely fast. But against any of the faster bosses, or the like Count Gilnor in the one time where I fought him, or Doriani, who just has this basically one-shot AoE attack, there's really not much that you can do to mitigate that type of damage, or to be able to keep your DPS up. So the build definitely struggles against those types of bosses. So yeah, I guess that's kind of it for the problems with the build. So yeah, to like summarize, and by the way, I'll talk really quickly about this. I did end up spending 3 div for this crossbow, and it makes a huge difference. I think this is almost perfect. Pretty much the only thing I would change is the leeches to attack speed. But yeah, percent increased fizz, flat fizz, elemental damage with attacks. You do need a very big crit hit chance bonus. That's because, like I said, crossbows have, for whatever godforsaken reason, 5% base crit hit chance. So you really need to scale the critical hit chance on your crossbow, because that's what your crit hit chance is based off of on all of your skills. So having just even a few more percentage on this makes a really big difference. I can show you actually really quick. So I believe I put this in, where did I put that? Yeah, right here. So if we look at this, you can see with this crossbow, we have a 37.63% chance to crit. With this one, which is just, it's about, 2.14% less, goes down 7%. So that one mod being about like 2% less reduces our crit chance by 7%, which is a lot. So yeah, it's very important to get a high crit chance bow, and this will increase your damage by a lot. You can even just look at the tooltip. Yeah, it's 2000 DPS here, but if we look at the burst, like the pulse, we have 68,000, and then the pulse on this one is 94,000. So this is a huge upgrade. But that's also because of the elemental damage with attacks. So yeah, this is just sidebar. This is a very, very good crossbow. This is kind of what you want. So yeah, that's kind of the problems with the build. Yeah, really squishy against kind of endgame stuff. In maps, it's not squishy at all. I pretty much blast through maps. My only real problem is against bosses from a tankiness perspective, not from a damage perspective. And then, yeah, I guess I'll kind of talk about my thoughts on the game, and kind of the future updates to the build. I'll do the future updates first, because you can clock out on the thoughts on the game if you don't want to listen to it. But yeah, so future updates on the build. I'm going to probably put out one more update that coincides with the release of this video. It'll include the updates on Mobalytics, and then that'll probably be it until there's a significant patch that would help address the problems that this build is facing. There's really no other sources of damage mitigation that I can get that makes sense. There's no way to get more life. The damage is good. I don't think that the build needs that much more damage. But yeah, there's not really any way to get more damage. I think that crossbows probably need to have higher base crit hit chance. I don't know why it's so low. Quarterstaves have a base percentage of 10, and for some reason crossbows are half of that, and they're both two-handed weapons. So I don't really, and it's clear that they want you to go crit because there's so many crit areas that are near the crossbow and near the merc. So I don't really know why the crit is so bad on crossbows, but yeah. So yeah, future updates are, I don't think that there will be another update for at least a little bit until some stuff changes. I think that this build needs to either be able to get more life, so it can survive some of the slam hits from bosses and stuff, or it can survive getting hit, twice or something like that. Ideally, I think this build would have around like 4,500 life, but there's absolutely no way to actually do that. Um, so, or there just needs to be more defensive options in the game, or like armor needs to make more sense, and then this build could switch back to like a hybrid armor evasion, or it could take, I think, it could take iron reflexes. If armor was good, it could take iron reflexes and convert all of the evasion rating to armor. Armor is not good at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of where I see future updates. I think I will come back to this build if there's anything that significantly changes for it, which I think that there will be. I think at some point there will be significant changes in the ability for life builds to actually get a respectable amount of life, and I also think armor is going to be buffed to be much better. So I think that I will revisit this build, and I want to, and I want to keep you guys updated. But yeah, right now I think that, you know, that's kind of where I'm at with the build, and this is probably where I'll leave it. And you guys are, you know, welcome to see what you can do and see if you can fix it. I think that it's kind of at its maximum potential right now, barring insane gear, obviously. But yeah, I think that it's pretty much at the point where I don't really see a way forward. I think that maybe you could try to start electrocuting to stun bosses and stuff, because that might help. But yeah, for the most part, I would say I'd probably call this build done until some stuff changes. So, all right. And then, yeah, I'll talk kind of quickly. I don't want to bore you guys too much. I'm sure you've seen a million videos of people talking about their thoughts on the game. But yeah, I think that the game is in the foundation of the game is really great, but the game is in kind of a pretty bad spot right now, I would say, at least in terms of the end game. The campaign is really fun, but the end game is pretty rough. I think that the Atlas needs a lot of work. Finding these citadels and then dying to the boss from a one shot that you didn't know was coming. And then, you know, that's just it. You had one try and you're fucked now. It seems insane to me. And I'll be shocked if that doesn't get changed. I think that, for maps, it's okay to have, you know, you die and you know, that's the map. You can't do anything about it, and it's over. I think that's fine, but I think that the bosses that you fight, like any of the pinnacle bosses and the citadels, should probably all be multi-use portals, so that you can, you know, at least try a few times, because it takes forever. I mean, I've played this character for probably over 100 hours, and I've found 3 citadels in the entire time that I've been playing, which I think is lucky from what I've heard. So, and each one of them I've died in. So, and that probably speaks to some weakness of the character. So yeah, I think that it's kind of, mapping is in kind of a rough state. I think that the maps themselves are actually pretty fun. I think towers are awful, and I think that they should just get auto completed when you get near them, or like when you connect to a node. But yeah, because they're just boring. I actually like the system of towers. I like what they do. I like how they show you a lot of the map when you complete them. I like how you can put the tablets in, which are basically just old sextants. You know, there's good things with the towers, but they do have the problem of being extremely repetitive. And then, yeah, I think that you've heard it a million times, I'm sure, but I think that rarity is probably too good in the game right now. But I do wish that if they do take out rarity, I hope that they do something like Last Epoch for solo self-found, where I think they need to just make it so that you can't migrate solo self-found, and just give a baseline rarity to solo self-found characters so that you can play the game solo self-found. I hate trading in this game. I think it's fucking awful. I don't want to do it, but I'm kind of forced to, because it's at the moment not realistic to find your own gear over the long term, because there's also really no crafting in the game. So it just feels like this game would be a lot stronger if they would let you do solo self-found And I mean, I know they let you, but if they made it stronger and made it so you can't migrate out, so that if you do solo self found, you're in solo self found, and you can't just go out of it and take all the wealth that you got if they do give you some sort of baseline rarity increase. Yeah, I think the game is really fun. Obviously, I've played it a shit ton. I think that the accessibility of builds is much higher. But yeah, I do think that the endgame Atlas is really weak. The Citadels are a really bad system. They're completely RNG, and then, like I said, you go in and you get one shot by the boss, and then that's it. So yeah, I think that's pretty much my thoughts on the on the game and the end game. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I would say, kind of closing thoughts on the build. I recommend the build if you go into the build with the understanding that you probably are not going to want to take it into pinnacle content. I think in retrospect, when I do these citadels, I probably should be unspecking these things to take off the map boss difficulty. I know it adds quantity and stuff like that. But if I just wanted a fragment, you could unspec these and make the map bosses a lot easier. But yeah, I think if you go in with the expectation of like, this is just going to be a map blaster, it's going to, clear maps really quickly, and I'm not taking this build into pinnacle content, I think that this is a great build. I think it has really great clear speed. The gear is not super expensive. I spent a lot of money on this, but you could buy a crossbow like this and it will get you through maps, no problem. And I think with this one, I think I spent like 40 exalts or something like that, which is not going to take you very long to farm. And I was using this before that. So there's plenty of things that you can do to, you don't need GG gear on this build to be able to clear, high tier maps and high tier bosses on those maps. It's definitely going to help with the bosses, but the maps, you'll be able to clear it very easily, especially if you were to take Zealous Inquisition. So yeah, I think if you go into the build with that expectation, then you will probably have a pretty good time, because I'm kind of realizing that this build can't handle pinnacle content, not at least in the current state of the game. So I think I'll leave it there. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I'm still going to be happy to support anybody that decides to take the build and run with it. I think the build is great for certain playstyles. I don't think it's great for bossing. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it there. This has been really rambly at the end. So I'll mark it as such in the timestamps. So if you guys don't want to listen to it, you don't have to. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the build. Let me know if you guys are doing anything differently that's making you a lot tankier. Or let me know if you guys have had success against any sort of pinnacle bosses with it. Yeah, just let me know how it's been going and what you guys think. And then hopefully I'll be able to see you guys sometime soon if GGG puts out a big patch anytime soon for armor or for life builds. I'll definitely be revisiting, and I'll keep you guys updated with what I'm doing. But yeah, until then, have a good one, guys. Thanks.